Hi everybody and welcome back. In today's video, we're going to talk about antihistamine foods that you should be including in your diet if you have histamine intolerance, mast cell disease, and quite possibly IBS. But before we get started, let's do a quick recap of our previous video to catch you up to speed. Now remember, you have a histamine pool that is coming from multiple places in your body and in your life, and our goal is to try to empty out that pool so it's not overflowing and causing you unpleasant symptoms. So from the histamine pool, we have several different hoses, and at different times of day, different times of year, different times in your life, the hoses could get bigger or smaller, or they might not be dumping into the pool at all. And it's your job and your clinician's job to help understand where those hoses are coming from, which ones are the biggest, and where you have the best therapeutic potential. So remember that histamine is a normal thing in the human body. It's not evil, it's not intrinsically bad, and it is made by mast cells, which are cells of the immune system that are there to protect you. When the mast cells are activated or they degranulate, they dump a whole bunch of histamine into the tissue, and there's a whole sequence of immune activation that ensues because of those mast cells, because they're really trying to help you. So your own immune system is one big generator of potential histamine. The other big ones that we discussed are largely coming from the gut, which is part of the relevance for the IBS and the SIBO world, because a lot of folks in those two worlds end up having some degree of histamine intolerance. So you can have histamine that is coming in from your food if you eat a food that actually contains histamine. So this would be something like a fermented or a preserved food, or aged cheeses, or older, like leftover meat and seafood. Tomatoes, things like that are generally going to be higher in histamine content, and then those molecules of histamine can get through the gut barrier and contribute to the histamine pool. That is going to be especially true, and you can imagine that the diameter of the hose gets much, much bigger if you are eating high histamine foods and also you have leaky gut syndrome. Remember, normally you should have a nice wall that's protecting you from the outside world, and normally a lot of stuff shouldn't get in unless your body intentionally asks it to come in. In the case of histamine, you not only will have more of a potential to absorb that histamine, but you won't be able to break it down if you don't have the gut integrity there, because you're making enzymes to break down histamine at that brush border. And now you have all these holes coming in where now it's like a leaky sieve, and then that leaky sieve ends up leading to this hose and it dumps into your histamine pool. So food and leaky gut are a big, big contributor. The other one that we talked about last time was the fact that some microbes are either consuming or producing histamine on any given day. And frankly, I don't think we have a great deal of understanding around this. We know that it happens, but we haven't really pinned down precisely which microbes are worthy of our attention as it pertains to the histamine production thing. But what we do know is that that happens, and the histamine that are made by the microbes, those molecules could theoretically do the same thing and get through the gut lining, particularly if you have a leaky gut. So you can see that leaky gut is really going to exacerbate any of your histamine issues, but also those microbes and their toxins and their cell wall components are going to signal to the mast cells, OMFG, they're in trouble, they need help, and those bacterial components and those metabolic byproducts of the bacteria and the yeast and the critters will go and directly stimulate the mast cells and then cause them to spew or degranulate out into the tissue, and now you have histamine coming from this direction as well. So that's your quick recap of things that we want to target. Now, as I mentioned before, you can decrease histamine content in your food, you can avoid things that would trigger leaky gut, you could do things for your microbiome, and you could do things directly for the mast cells. Now, as we talk about the antihistamine component of this, like the addition and the subtractions are really interesting to get into from a psychology perspective, I think, because I find a lot of people are quite keen to go after the bad foods and cut out the bad foods. But most people are less intentional about intentionally adding in the new foods that are going to counteract the negative side effects that they want to not have happen. But this is a really important area for us to have a therapeutic intervention. So first and foremost, leaky gut. Let's think about some of the nutrients that are needed to seal up the leaky gut so that that's no longer a problem. Well, bone broth is probably the most famous, right? Everybody and their brother, especially after paleo got big, is doing bone broth all day, every day. So theoretically, things like bone broth, glycine, glutamine, those are all going to be really important for leaky gut. But I would argue also that fiber, prebiotics and fiber, and having a diversity in your diet, having variety in your diet, is going to be the ultimate thing you could do to make sure that not only that your microbes are happy and that you're treating any dysbiosis that you might have, but also to make sure that you are sealing up the gut barrier. Because remember, if you go back to the mucus videos, if you go back to the leaky gut videos, the leaky gut and the quality of this mucus layer that's above the leaky gut, those are both dictated by the diversity of your diet, the diversity of your plant fibers, and the diversity of your microbes. And if you want a diverse ecosystem in the gut, which, oh my gosh, you do, you really need to make sure that you have diversity in your food. And this is where like juggling the low histamine diet and the anti-histamine thing could be tricky, because going on a really strict anti-histamine diet can be intrinsically not a diverse diet. And then what happens is you start to lose diversity in your microbiome, you start to lose integrity in the gut lining, and now you have more of a propensity to absorb that histamine, and going on a super restrictive diet can actually make histamine problems worse in the long run. So it's a very slippery slope. You need to work with somebody who knows what they're doing and really help you navigate what you need to add and subtract for real, rather than just handing you a worksheet saying, all right, no more histamine for you, and then kind of calling it quits. So that is an angle that you could take, is you could try to add in foods that would heal up leaky gut so that you no longer have leaky gut. Again, things like glutamine, glycine, even nutrients, like you need basically any vitamin or mineral, and you need protein and fat and carbs. You need those building blocks to really nourish your body and make sure that it has the ability to heal. So really, any of those could be important, but I think that the number one for me is still going to be prebiotic fibers and a diversity in your plant foods. Now that also largely will take care of the microbe/dysbiosis piece of it, and that will make these become a lot less of an issue. So now you don't have those bad microbes or those imbalanced microbes stimulating the immune response and stimulating the mast cells to the degree that they were. And maybe if we want to be really optimistic, we could even think and hope and dream that now the good microbes are sending good anti-inflammatory signals to the gut lining and the mast cells and the immune cells. Like, how cool would that be? Not to just take away the negative, but to add a positive influence on the mast cells via the microbiome. That'd be pretty stinking cool. So yes, fiber is a big biggie here. Also, I would say fermented foods. And this is, again, where this can be in contrast with the low histamine diet. So theoretically, if you look at the lists, all of them are going to say that anything fermented and any sort of like yogurt or kefir or, you know, something with prebiotics in it, or rather probiotics in it, is going to be detrimental for histamine purposes, but you don't know until you try it. If you have histamine intolerance primarily because of microbial dysbiosis, and say you are walking around with hardly any good bacteria in your ecosystem to speak of, it could be that you're not actually over-consuming high histamine foods. It could be that you just have wicked dysbiosis, and that eating a fermented food and getting some new probiotics is miraculously helpful for your histamine things. But if you just stick with the antihistamine food list, you're going to think that food is bad for you and you're never going to try it. So have that mental flexibility. Try things and see what your body thinks of it. And also, I would argue that not all probiotics are created equal. I have noticed when I have my patients speed date a lot of different probiotics, even my most squirrely, and I say that with love, and inflamed mast cell patients do really well with some probiotics, but there's some probiotics that their bodies super don't jive with. And you just have to play with it a little bit until you find it. I have never seen a patient yet who hated every single one of the probiotics I've had them try. I have not seen that. I've had a lot of people who end up liking a few and then they hate a few other ones. And I've had a handful of people who thought kind of meh for all of them, but nobody has vigorous histamine reactions to every single probiotic. And I know because I have patients try about 20 of them. So it might be that you need some probiotics or some fermented foods to tackle the dysbiosis. Could be that you need antimicrobials or other supplements, but I would start with fiber when in doubt, and then you could branch out to those other things a little bit down the road. Then, so we have therapeutic target. We can try to manipulate the microbes, namely through fiber, but also things like prebiotics. We can add in leaky gut support so that you no longer have as much of a leaky gut. And that would be things, again, like glycine, glutamine, bone broth. Fiber is going to be a big biggie here. And then over in this side of the world, we can think about the mast cells directly. So we want to quiet them down so that they're no longer degranulating all over the place. And we could try to put the kibosh on them or inhibit them. And we could do that with some antihistamine compounds. So namely, this is going to be things like quercetin and luteolin. So these are compounds that have antihistamine properties, and yes, you can buy them as nutritional supplements, and yes, I use those in my patients all the time, but it's not the be-all end-all. You can actually get these compounds through food as well. So for example, luteolin and quercetin both are found in a lot of different culinary spices, and things like quercetin are found in apples and onions. Actually, a lot of FODMAP foods end up having some quercetin and luteolin in them. Things like elderberries, capers. There's a whole list of foods that either have quercetin. Whoop. Oh, that looks so much worse. There we go. So I'll just put Q, L for quercetin and luteolin. And side note, I don't expect you to memorize all of that I just rambled off. If you go ahead and go to the link in the doobly-doo down below, I've linked a link where you can request a copy of a Low Histamine Diet handout, which is where I outline high histamine foods, medium and low histamine foods for my patients. And also I have another one that is my anti-histamine food list. And I have a list of foods that have quercetin and luteolin in them that you can refer to. And I think I have a couple of articles in there as well. So if you want a copy of either of those, just go to the link in the doobly-doo and let me know where to send it, and I'd be happy to send that to you. But you could do direct antihistamines like quercetin and luteolin. Even honestly, some herbs can be really useful, and they can be used in a more culinary sense. So things like stinging nettle have antihistamine qualities to them and mast cell stabilizing qualities to them, like quercetin and luteolin, but you can actually cook with nettles. You can, oh gosh, I have a whole recipe book. It's like an herbal medicine cookbook. And I remember I saw there's a stinging nettle soup that I found in there. There's another one where I think it's like a pesto, but it's made with stinging nettle. Certainly you can get the dried stinging nettle leaf and you can make that into a drink or make that into something if you get the dried nettle leaf. So stinging nettle is wonderful. Another herb that has antihistamine and immune balancing qualities to it that is used culinarily quite a bit of the time is astragalus. Astragalus, I have never seen an American person cooking with astragalus, but I was living with Asian roommates for quite a lot of my college and grad school years, and a lot of the times they just threw a couple pieces of astragalus root in a soup or a stock when they were cooking it, and they're getting that medicinal quality of the astragalus, and they're getting that immune balancing and modulating property of the astragalus, and they're using an herb, but they're using it in their food. And that way they're getting a little bit every day or a couple times a week. And astragalus can actually be used culinarily in addition to using it as a supplement. Same thing goes for nettle. So these are the big things I would say right now is that in addition to avoiding things that are triggering for you, that should go without saying. And that was more the purpose of the last video. In our world here, what we're thinking of now is fiber, particularly a diverse array of different fibers, and that's going to be protective and balancing for your microbes and the leaky gut itself. And you're going to help, you get my drift. It's going to be helpful for the microbes and the leaky gut. I don't know where my brain was going on that one. But a diversity of fiber is particularly effective. And then if you want to throw in things like bone broth, then that is wonderful as well. Collagen peptides, I'm a huge fan of that product. And then over here, we can try to directly calm down the mast cells through food. And also there's a whole lot of herbs, but we can try to calm down the mast cells and stabilize them with foods that are rich in quercetin, luteolin. Arguably, nettle and astragalus can both be used as supplements or food-related compounds. And I would say also, any vitamin or mineral potentially has the ability to help heal leaky gut, alter the microbiome, and quiet down the mast cells, or help you process histamine more directly. because remember, you need enzymes and you need vitamins and minerals to make those enzymes go and to help build new mast cells and to help chill them out. And like vitamins and minerals really cannot be overstated. So even something, if it doesn't have a specific antihistamine property to it, has the therapeutic potential to be helpful for you. Like let's say that you have histamine issues because you're zinc deficient. Well, then maybe you actually need to have some shellfish like clams or oysters, and maybe that would be really helpful because it would help you overcome zinc deficiency. But wait, shellfish and bivalves, aren't those going to be high histamine? I mean, maybe. But again, if the reason for your histamine intolerance is something like zinc deficiency, that supposedly high histamine food could be really therapeutic for you. So little something to chew on. Food metaphor, or food pun intended. One more area I want to point out also is that you actually have one more small window of therapeutic potential right here. So at the tip top of these cells, that's called the brush border, and that's where you make an enzyme called DAO, diamine oxidase. And this is an enzyme that actually breaks down dietary histamine for you. Now there's other enzymes also. So there's like HNMT, there are other things particularly as involved with the methylation cycle, that help your body process histamine. But if you want to talk about dietary-derived histamine and microbial-derived histamine, you really want DAO to be there. Now, if you want to make DAO, you need to have the gut integrity to do so. So again, going back to healing the leaky gut, the fiber, the prebiotics, that goes a long way. But you can also get pea sprouts. And I've seen these at my local health food store. I don't know if they're always there, but you can get or you can make pea sprouts. And those are a rich source of DAO, the enzyme that is needed to degrade histamine. So I remember like now they actually have supplements with DAO in them, and you could buy the supplement, you could take it with your food. Some people find it very, very helpful. Others don't notice an effect from it. But I remember this product went off the market for about 1.5 years, and a lot of my histamine patients were freaking out because it was really helpful for them and it just vaporized. I think the company was going through some financial hardship, or they were getting acquired by another company. So we just couldn't order it for about 1.5 years. And I had all of my histamine intolerant patients going to Whole Foods and buying up the pea sprouts because they were at least getting a little bit of DAO in their body that way. And it did seem to help a lot of people. So nearly forgot that, but fiber is absolutely the number one. Things like DAO in a supplement or in pea sprouts can be very helpful. Anything to help heal leaky gut, certainly. And then finally, some antihistamine foods. And like I said, I would actually include vitamins and minerals. Even if the food has no other antihistamine qualities to it, there's still the potential that something that is a rich source of a vitamin or mineral could be really helpful for you, especially if you happen to be deficient in that particular nutrient. So you have a wide variety to choose from. Like I said, if you want a handout with foods that are rich in quercetin and luteolin, then go ahead and just click the link in the doobly-doo down below. I would be absolutely happy to send you both of my histamine handouts. I use these with patients, so they really are meant to be super easy to use and like super straightforward. But just let me know where to send it and I would be happy to do that. I hope that this provides some clarity and it wasn't overly confusing. But I will see you in the next video. Thank you so much for tuning in. Hey guys, if you like this video, be sure to subscribe, ring the bell, click the like button, and leave a comment down below with the videos that you would like to see me do next. Doing all of those really helps support the channel and support my efforts in making as many videos as possible for you guys. Thanks so much, and I'll see you in the next video.